I never believed in curses until I worked as Grace Kelly's personal secretary during her final months in 1982. What I witnessed in those last weeks before her tragic accident still haunts me to this day, and I'm finally ready to tell the truth about what really happened behind the palace walls of Monaco. It started with the crown. Not her official tiara, mind you, but an ancient piece that Prince Rainier had given her as a wedding anniversary gift in 1981. He'd discovered it in the palace vaults, buried beneath centuries of royal artifacts. The moment Grace laid eyes on it, something changed. The woman who had conquered Hollywood with her grace and poise suddenly seemed different. The crown itself was breathtaking, crafted from obsidian and silver, adorned with 13 black diamonds that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. According to the palace historian, it had belonged to a 14th-century Grimaldi princess who had died under mysterious circumstances. Some said she had practiced witchcraft, others claimed she had been murdered by jealous courtiers. What everyone agreed on was that every woman who had worn the crown had met a tragic end. Grace was fascinated by it. She would spend hours in her private study, turning it over in her hands, tracing the intricate engravings with her fingertips. I remember walking into her room one evening to find her standing before her mirror, the crown balanced on her head, her reflection somehow darker than it should have been in the candlelight. "Do you ever feel like you're being watched, Margaret?" she asked me one afternoon as we sorted through her correspondence. Her voice had taken on this distant quality, as if she were speaking from somewhere far away. The strange incidents began small. Doors that had been locked would swing open on their own. The palace cats refused to enter certain rooms. Staff members reported feeling cold spots in the hallways, even during Monaco's warmest days. But what disturbed me most were the whispers. Late at night, when the palace was supposed to be silent, you could hear them. Soft, feminine voices speaking in what sounded like medieval French. Grace claimed she could understand them, that they were telling her stories about the old princess, about betrayal and revenge. She started wearing the crown more frequently, even to casual dinners and private meetings. Prince Rainier was concerned but attributed his wife's behavior to stress. Grace had been struggling with the restrictions of royal life, missing her acting career, feeling trapped by protocol and duty. The whispers told her she deserved better, that she had been a goddess on screen and shouldn't have to bow to anyone. I'll never forget the night everything changed. It was September 10, 1982, just 3 days before the accident. Grace had locked herself in the crown room, as she'd started calling her study. I could hear her talking to someone, but every time I pressed my ear to the door, the voices would stop. When she finally emerged at dawn, her eyes were bloodshot and wild. "She showed me the truth, Margaret," Grace whispered, gripping my shoulders with shaking hands. "The princess didn't die by accident. She was pushed from the palace cliffs because she refused to give up her power. They made it look like suicide, but she knew. Oh, she knew." The crown seemed heavier on her head that morning, the black diamonds pulsing with an otherworldly energy. Grace had always been elegant, but now she moved with an almost supernatural grace, as if she were floating rather than walking. Imagine discovering that someone you admired, someone whose movies you'd watched countless times, was slowly being consumed by something dark and ancient. What would you do? Would you try to help, or would you run? I tried to reason with her, to suggest she put the crown away for a while. But Grace just smiled that sad, beautiful smile of hers and said, "Don't you see? This is who I was meant to be. Not just an actress playing a princess, but a real princess with real power." The final piece of the puzzle came from the palace archives. While Grace was preparing for what would be her last public appearance, I discovered a hidden compartment in an old desk. Inside was a journal written by the original princess, dated 1348. The entries detailed her experiments with dark magic, her attempts to bind her soul to the crown so that she might live forever through future wearers. The journal's final entry chilled me to the bone. "I have succeeded. Death cannot claim me now. I shall return through another, and when I do, I will have my revenge on those who wronged me." On September 13th, as Grace prepared to drive Stephanie to school, she insisted on wearing the crown beneath a silk scarf. I begged her not to go, told her about the journal, about my fears. She just looked at me with eyes that weren't quite her own anymore and said, "Some journeys must be taken alone." The official report stated that Grace suffered a stroke while driving, causing her to lose control of the Rover P6 on the winding roads above Monaco. But I know the truth. In those final moments, as the car careened toward the cliff, Grace Kelly wasn't the one behind the wheel. The crown was never found among the wreckage. Some say it returned to the palace vaults on its own, waiting for the next victim. Others believe it was destroyed in the flames. But sometimes, late at night, when the moon is dark and the palace is quiet, you can still hear the whispers echoing through the halls. Grace Kelly's story didn't end with her death. It became part of something much older, much darker. And somewhere in Monaco, that cursed crown is still waiting, still calling out to its next victim, promising power and eternal beauty to anyone foolish enough to place it upon their head. I leave you with the song Grace loved to listen to during those final days. La Vie en Rose. See you in the next video.